Hello everyone, this is Shlok, and in today's video we're going to be discussing what all is happening in the world of NMIMS over the last couple of days, and most importantly, in the midst of all this uncertainty, I'll be highlighting my own approach of dealing with it and what I think about the whole interview process and how I'm going about prepping for the same. So without further ado, let's get started. So coming on to the most interesting part, first of all, what all has been happening in the world of NMIMS lately over the last couple of days. And I've made a few notes, but let me know if I'm missing something. The first thing I think was the whole thing that we've already discussed with them almost scrapping the NMAT with only a 20% weightage in the composite score now. And I have seen a few videos on YouTube where a few mentors have been discussing that how much difference would it create if you have scored a 210 versus a 260, and the difference is minuscule, about a 4 point difference if you look at 100 point scale. So that was a little heartbreaking aspect of it. And the second thing I wanted to talk about is they said that the slots would be provided on a first come first serve basis. So a lot of people, some of them, because they could only get the slots like 3rd or 4th February, they ended up booking them, but now they've opened up the slots much later on as well, which is 16th February and so on. So that the thing that happened is the people who were early, they ended up getting the slots which were worse off, and the people who were late, they now get to choose the later slots. So that's a little unfair on the people who were early, and it kind of breaks the whole purpose of first come first serve. So that was one important aspect that I wanted to bring up. After that, so this was the second aspect, which is first come first serve is kind of did not go in the favor of people. So that was one thing. Apart from that, some of the interviews we have some of the interviews are going to be happening by the 31st, are going to start by the 31st of Jan, and that leaves very less room for us to prepare for interviews. So that is also a very important factor, that how do we go about interview prep in such a short duration of time. And last but not the least is the decreased weightage of the personal interview process, and that leaves a lot of us wondering that how do we go about navigating this situation wherein the personal interview process has such little weightage. How much of our time should we allocate to preparing for the interviews, and if the interviews are going to be having such a low weightage, what kind of interviews might be, what kind of interviews does the NMIMS have in mind when they are thinking about taking interviews. So that is all that we are going to be discussing today. Additionally, I also wanted to discuss what I think about what this whole competency test is going to be, which I'm calling the NMAT 2.0. So what is the NMAT 2.0 going to be about? I'm going to make a few conjectures about that. So that is also going to be one aspect of this video. And last but not the least, we are going to be talking about some rumors that I've heard about this, the fact that this interview could be an AI interview, like what we have seen for Great Lakes Institute of Management. So, that is also a very interesting aspect to deal with. So that's a brief summary. It's not a brief summary anymore, but this is all that we are going to be discussing. Stay tuned. So I think the first most crucial aspect that a lot of us want to thoroughly understand is how do we go about doing our interview prep. And what my approach is to this is, I'm not taking too much stress about the interview, especially because it only has a 10% weightage. So more or less the NMAT, my past acads, work X, and most importantly the competency assessment is going to have made a huge chunk of the decision already for me. So the fact that we only have a limited amount of time to brush up on our interview is not that big of a trouble, because the interview has very less weightage, and it also boils down to the fact that it is not going to be particularly long. For example, what I've heard is NMIMS and SIBM as well, their interviews are not more than 12 minutes for the most part. Yours could stretch to 20 minutes. I'm not saying there are not any exceptions to this rule, but statistically, for the most part, your interview at max will be 12 minutes long. And with your interview being 12 minutes long, it also says a lot about a few other things. For example, the first most important thing is your intro should be very short, because if your intro itself is about 2 minutes long, so that itself is about 2 out of 10, that is about 20% of your entire interview, if you consider your interview to be 10 minutes long. And now with so many people interviewing this year, because the cutoffs have been dropped significantly, my belief is that the duration of the interview is going to become even shorter. Close to 8 to 10 minutes is also possible. So that makes your intro should ideally be super short. Somewhere close to 60 seconds is what I would recommend. So that is the first aspect to our interview prep. After that, one thing that I'm looking at are HR questions, something that I've already discussed in one of my previous videos. So if you haven't checked that out, please consider checking it out. In that video, I talk about the why MBA question and some HR questions such as strengths and weaknesses, your biggest failure, your biggest success, and so on. So that particular video covers those aspects. So HR questions are super important. So HR questions are basically personality based questions, and this I especially expect to encounter in an interview that is very short, because these questions, they help you to understand the other individual in the shortest duration of time. So HR questions become super important. The next is past acads. Of course, past acads is something that is a very deep thing. You cannot really expect to cover that in 10 days, even 15 days for that matter. So how do we go about navigating this? And the reply to that aspect is that I would ask, whoever is confused as to how we can approach our past acads, is sit in the shoes of the interviewer and try to understand that what are the most basic questions that he or she can ask me. For example, me coming from the commerce side of things can say that if a panel is asking me about my past acads, I can expect anything from journal entries to financial ratios to net present value, internal rate of return, anything like that. But they wouldn't go crazy and ask me about research methodology mein, what is the F test and what is the T test and what is the Z test. That becomes very niche. So the probability of that coming becomes extremely low. So you need to sort of understand ki, what is the probability of something that I've studied being brought up in the interview. So that is one very important aspect. What after past acads? I think a very important aspect is going to be which specialization do you want to take. And I'm gonna be discussing that in a future video, but to just give a gist right now, there are a few specializations: finance, HR, operations, supply chain management, and there is entrepreneurship, there is marketing. So out of these specializations, you need to understand that what is your calling, what is the kind of job profile that you need, which I've also covered in one of my previous videos. In my why MBA video only, I've covered this, that how to choose your specific profile that you want to be working in, and that will really help you out in choosing your specialization. So getting to know your specialization, super important. So that's a little bit about what you should definitely cover. Now, what are the optional things that you should cover? I would say current affairs. For an interview that is only 10 to 12 minutes long, current affairs becomes sort of optional, because there is only so much time to get to know you that it doesn't leave a lot of room to ask about GK and current affairs. So of course there could be, I'm not saying that there is no possibility of anyone asking you what the Mahakumbh is or anything of that sort, but the odds of that decrease. So if you want to prioritize, you need to understand that what should be my first, second, third, fourth priority, and then go in that particular order. Once you've covered almost all of these aspects, you would yourself start to understand that what are the particular places where I'm lacking. And also one very important thing that becomes is mock PIs. I think about 2 mock PIs should really give you a lot of exposure and a lot of confidence. For example, even in the CAT, what we did we took as many mocks as possible. So if you can take about 10 to 12 minute interviews from some of your trusted friends or some of your mentors, that will really help you out, and it'll make you confident in your communication abilities, and also in the fact that you've seen something of this sort before. So those would most likely be some of my tips to anyone who's going to be approaching his first MBA interview. I know that it can be a lot to take in. Even my first interview experience last year was for IIM CAP, for IIM Udaipur. So that, and the nerves are pretty, the heartbeat starts beating faster and faster as soon as you realize that you're the next one who's going to be in the line. But after the end of the process, if you've done well, and even if you haven't, the fact that you went through that whole process makes you feel a lot it makes you feel enriched, and it makes you feel like you've learned something about yourself today. Definitely, after taking care of what the interview could be, if a human being was taken that interview, we can move on to what could be what could happen if an AI was taking your interview. And it is not really like an AI. It is just it is AI in terms of trying to examine how your communication skills are, but it is not AI in terms of questions. So from what I've asked about, from what I've asked to one of my friends who gave the interview for Great Lakes Institute of Management, what he told me was the questions were standard and they were the same for all of them. For example, everyone gets asked to, tell me something about yourself, and everyone gets asked that why do you want to do an MBA, and everyone gets asked questions, that are very, very general, something like a strengths and weaknesses, failure, something your biggest failure and success, and what did you do in your work experience. So AI is not in terms of the fact that the AI is gonna be cross questioning you. Instead, the AI interview is more like they are using AI in order to judge your communication skills. So just in case, I'm in no way, even speculating the fact that this could be an AI interview, but just in case, if there is an AI interview, having some idea about it is better than having no idea at all. So in case there is an AI interview, it becomes all the more important that you brush up your HR questions, which is why MBA, strengths and weaknesses, tell me about yourself, etc., etc., in a very thorough manner. Next is, what do I think about NMAT 2.0, and that is going to be the component which has the most weightage, about 50%. So at this point, if you've done well, if you do well in the competency assessment, you've almost made your way into one of the good colleges in the country. So that is a great aspect of this competency test, and it gives a second chance to someone who couldn't perform optimally on the first NMAT that they gave. So what do I think? And this is purely conjecture. I am in no way saying that I know what is going to be in it, but my guess is that it would not be, some of the people are saying that it would be, what do you call it, it is something similar to what the MyCat conducts, which is it was called a psychometric assessment. So psychometric assessment, in a psychometric assessment, there are no particular right or wrong answers. They are just trying to get to know you, and they are trying to get to know your personality through a lot of questions. So psychometric, I'm not saying that psychometric could not be there. I'm just saying that psychometric assessment would not be the only assessment that would be there, because this is a huge chunk, 50%. So if they want good candidates, they are also gonna wanna test what are your VARC skills like, what are your logical reasoning skills like, and what are your quant skills like. And I don't know if each of the people who are coming in on different slots and different days, would they all have different questions in the competency assessment, or would they all have the same questions? So this is also something that is not very clear right now. But the only thing that I can gather is that if the questions are going to be repeating, the occurrence of quant is going to be a lot less, because it is much easier for someone to propagate the answers of quants as opposed to logic or VARC and so on. So if the questions are going to be repeated, the weightage of quants is going to be a lot less. And if quant is there, then quant questions would be terribly long, so that it becomes very difficult for someone to come out of the exam hall and propagate what his or her findings are. And yeah, as to what is it that's going to come in the competency assessment, I think all these things that I've written down, VARC, logic, quant, and I think everything that they have tested in the NMAT, they are going to test again in this particular assessment, because of the fact that they want to do an in-house check also on all of their students in order to ensure their capabilities. But I think the NMAT exam was already, it was a fairly difficult exam. So something along those lines is what we can expect in the competency assessment also. So I was lucky because I did get a favorable date within the first come first thing, because I ended up filling it the day this whole thing was released, and I was filling it up by about 2 a.m. The day an announcement came that there is going to be this competency assessment and so on. So I got the date of 12th February, and I made sure that I took one of the later dates. But now that I think about it, I should have taken an earlier date in order to know and in order to be able to share with you what my findings were. But that's okay now. What once is done cannot be changed. But in case any one of you has one of the earlier dates, already one of my friends has the date of 3rd Feb. So definitely, as soon as I get to know what all is happening at NMIMS, I would be eager to share my findings with you. But if someone's going even before the 3rd of February, please, make sure, let me know, and we can have a chat as soon as you're done, so we can, share what kind of, I'll definitely not be sharing sharing what the specific questions are that are coming in the exam, but I'll definitely be sharing what the paper pattern was like and how the interview is like. Is it an actual interview with people, or is it an AI interview, and what kind of time duration the whole process is taking. So we'll be covering all of that. So that is one very important aspect. In addition to that, yeah, something very fairly interesting is the fact that I can write on the screen now. So I can also, cover a few topics that are related to quants. I'm not saying I'm a quant genius, but to the best of my abilities, I will try. So if I can make any new content, in that space, I would love to try that out as well. So if you have any doubts, feel free to reach out to me and, give me any new content ideas. I really, really appreciate that. And I think that was a little bit about this video. And thank you so much for watching till the end, and bye bye.